Greetings to another video. Today we're going to talk all about one of my favourite things, and that is power meters, because the majority of you watching this can benefit massively from using a power meter and having a power meter on your bike. And these fall into two different categories. So you can have a power meter and use it for basically your club rides, your social rides, your leisure rides, your tours, just all the general stuff. And then you can also use it as a way just to basically become like beast mode and become the fittest cyclist you can ever possibly be. So I'm going to cover both of those things and how you potentially could use a power meter. What is an actual power meter? So it's basically just a way of measuring the force that you are putting through your bike, essentially, and that is measured in a thing called watts. And you can get different types of power meters. You can get ones that are pedal based, you can get ones that are crank based, but essentially it's just measuring how much force you are putting through the bike. Right, so let's get on to how to actually use this. If you've bought one and you just got it out of the box, you're like, how do I use it? So what I would suggest is obviously fit it onto your bike. And then I want you to go to if you're a climber, go to your local climb. If you prefer flat rides, do a segment on a road that you know well and that you've done a lot, and go out and just do your best effort on that segment, on that climb, on that stretch of road. And then I want you to come back and look at the numbers that you have got for that particular climb. So for me, when I got my first power meter, I went and did an effort on my favourite climb. It's not my favourite climb anymore, it's anyway, it is called Dove Stones, and that was like a 20, 25, 30 minute climb. And so what I did, I went out, did that effort, I went all in as hard as I could go for that climb. And then I got back and I looked at how much power I put out for that 20, 25 minute effort. And obviously you can do the same. And then what you need to do from that is you're then able to know what your power or your overall effort is for, say, a climb of that length or that distance. And so then from club rides and other different routes and events that I did, I know, so for example, and I can't remember what it was, but say that my 20-minute power or my 30-minute power for that climb is, say, 250 watts. I know on a club ride, if there's a climb coming up and it's, say, 30 minutes or 4.5k, whatever, similar, I know I can hold that amount of power for that amount of time. So if I set off and I know that my power numbers are way above that, I'm not going to be able to sustain that and I'm going to blow up. Blow up essentially just means like see your arse and just have to like stop and just die, basically. And then also if there's a climb on that route that is a lot shorter and I'm like, okay, it's only half that, I know I can push higher watts. So that's a way of understanding how to pace. And then the other thing with that is, if you want to get fitted without having to do any training plans, just go back and try and push that number up. So go back, and that's what I did. I went to Dove Stones and I was like, right, I'm going to try and push that number higher. And then I just did that week on week on week. And actually one of my goals was to become Queen of the Mountain on that climb. It was my favourite climb. And I eventually did that with using a power meter, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without a power meter. It would have been a lot harder. So it's just a very good metric just to actually see and understand what you're putting out. And then the other reason that is really good is, so for example, you're doing a 100k ride. Go out and ride that 100k and look what your average power is for that ride. So say it's 4 or 5 hours. And I find that really helpful, especially for Audaxes and longer distance events, because I know what my average power is just from riding, just looking at numbers for, say, a 200k is. And if I'm setting off and I'm with a group and I'm with other riders and they are pushing a lot higher than I know that I can push, I'm going to have to ease off because I can't sustain that for that distance. And so it's really handy to have to understand your numbers and your pace. And then the other thing that I generally do is, I don't know if any of you are runners, you'll understand this, but it's called a negative split in running. And that basically means you run your second half of the race or the event or whatever you've got faster than the first half. And I do that exact same thing in pretty much all my rides. So I go out the first half steadier, and then I push harder in the second, and having a power meter enables me to do that. So if you're someone that doesn't want to train, doesn't want to necessarily use a power meter to get necessarily a lot fitter, using it just to be able to pace and understand your body and understand how your power works. It's just so handy, and it's so good. You don't have to go all in. You don't have to be like 20 hours a week training, but to pace and understand your numbers is just so much better for enjoying your rides more and knowing where your limits are, and also when you can push your limits. Right, and then the second side is the training side. I love this so much because I actually love training. I love doing workouts. I love it. I love pushing myself. I love the sweat. I love the whole thing. And so if this is up your street, then this is how to do it. So basically there's two ways of measuring your current fitness, because to get fitter you need to know where you currently are, and there are two different ways that you can do that, and they are called a ramp test and an FTP test, which stands for functional threshold power. So the ramp test, I've actually never done a ramp test, but basically what that means is you are doing like a workout in different, generally I think these are more done indoors. I think it's really hard to do these outdoors, but basically you're going through different intervals of power and watts, and each increment ramps up to a higher power number, and you keep doing that and pushing that until you can't do any more, and then it works out your power numbers. You can do that on Zwift, for example. The other way is a functional threshold power test, which is my personal favourite. I actually really like doing these, and that is a 20-minute effort. I think you can do like a 10-minute one as well, but generally they're 20 minutes. So what you want to do is either go to your local climb, go to a flat piece of road that you know that you can ride for 20 minutes, or you can do it indoors. I will say though, if you are planning to do, this is just kind of a side note, if you are planning to do all your training indoors, do your FTP indoors. If you're planning to do all your training outdoors, do your FTP outdoors, because it can vary. So for example, for me, my power outdoors is quite a bit higher than it is indoors. I don't know why. Some people is the opposite way around. Some people can push higher what's indoors. I can't. Mine's just higher outdoors. So yeah, side note. So yeah, so get that 20 minutes. Go all out. You've got to really like push as hard as you can, but it's also about pacing it. So you don't want to go out too hard at the start and then die in the middle. And then when you get that number, there's like calculators online that you can do this on. There's a British cycling one that I've always used. So you put your 20-minute number in. So say you got 200 watts for that 20-minute effort. Your FTP is 95% of that. You don't need to work it out. There's, like I said, there's that British cycling calculator. I'll leave a link to that. And that comes up with all your different power zones. So like your active recovery, endurance, tempo, sweet spot, VO2 max, anaerobic. So there's all those different training zones. And then from then, once you know your different power numbers for each of those zones, you can follow a training plan. And there are multiple ways that you can follow training plans. So you can get one from just on the internet. I'm sure there's loads there. You can get a coach. You can get them in your Garmin. So if you put your FTP in your Garmin head unit, I think the majority give you a training plan. Or you could get a coach. My coach called Mark Holloway, he's just amazing. He's Revolution Cyclist. I'll leave a link if you want to get coached by him. There's also really good training plans on Zwift. So depending on what you want to do, there's like so many different ones. There's like 100k, 100 mile. I think there's a gravel specific training plan. There's so many to choose from. So if you're going to do all your training indoors on Zwift this winter, so many training plans on there. And then you just follow that plan. And depending on what you want to do, if you want to get better endurance, if you want to get better at racing, it's kind of tweaking around all those different power zones and pushing you and trying to build on those, so eventually getting your watts higher each of those power zones, if that makes sense. Like I say, I've loved using that power meter to be able to train to those things, and I think it's really beneficial just to have that, just to feel a stronger cyclist. But you can use the power meter in two different ways, and that's how I used it, and that's how I got a lot fitter using that power meter. Also, one thing to mention, don't worry about what your actual FTP is. It doesn't really matter. That number is an arbitrary number. All that matters is that you're using that number as your current fitness level and a blueprint to be able to build on that fitness and then raise that FTP over time. So don't be too hard on yourself if you're like, oh, it's not very good. It doesn't actually matter. It's just where your current fitness level is at right now. And that's not gonna increase, because you're gonna get the power, you're gonna do all the training, you're gonna get super fit. So they are the two ways that I have used power meters. And I know there's gonna be a load of you out there being like, oh, I just train with heart rate, like surely that's enough. It's fine. However, I would say training with power is more objective. So the power that you put out is just the power, that's it. Whereas heart rate is more a way of reacting to that power that you're putting out, and it has so many more variables. So it can be affected by heat, it can be affected by hydration, it can be affected by illness. And so I like using heart rate as a way to kind of monitor how I'm responding to my power output. So for example, I can always kind of catch in time if I'm getting a little bit ill, because I'm like, oh, I can normally push that power without my heart rate getting so high. And so that's a way for me to kind of just keep tabs on that and like, oh, maybe I should rest up a little bit. So yeah, that's how I use heart rate incorporated into power as well. Honestly though, I don't think that power meters are just for the pros. I think they're really beneficial in pacing and just getting fit as a cyclist. So if you've got any other questions about power meters, training, anything about that, leave it in the comments and maybe I'll do another separate video. But yeah, thank you so much for watching and I will see you all next video. Okay, goodbye.